We're looking at just some circle vocabulary, just some basic stuff so that we can talk about circles moving forward and do a little bit of different stuff with them. So stuff you already know, maybe a radius, a line segment with one endpoint at the center of the circle and the other endpoint on the circle. You may or may not have heard what a chord is, but a chord is a line segment with both ends on the circle. We're going to give you a picture of that here in a second. Diameter is a chord, so it's a line segment with endpoints on the circle, and it goes through the center of the circle and cuts the circle in half. So here's your picture. There's a chord on the left side. Its endpoints are on the circle. Diameter is a chord that goes through the center of the circle, and radius is a line segment with one endpoint at the center and one endpoint on the circle. Secant line is a ray or line that touches the circle in two places, and a tangent line is a ray or line that touches the circle in one place. So here's your pictures for that. I gave you a secant that's a ray and a secant that's a line, and then I gave you a tangent line right there. So notice the tangent line touches it one time. Secant lines touch it twice. Circumference is the perimeter of a circle. You've seen those equations before. Circumference equals 2 pi r. R stands for radius. You've probably used 3.14 at some point for pi. We have a button on our calculator for pi, so we're going to just use that button instead of the 3.14. You could also have said circumference equals pi times diameter. That diameter, d, is equal to 2 times the radius. So that's why those things are exactly the same. You can use either one. We're going to use this one, circumference equals 2 pi r on the left side. We're going to use that one instead of pi times diameter. An arc is a fraction of the circumference. So if the circumference is like the length of a crust of the pizza, okay, so the entire crust of a pizza, taking the length of that, then an arc is the length of the crust of a few pieces. Okay, so let's look at a picture here. We got here's our arcs. I didn't minor, major arc. Sorry, forgot those words. Minor arc is less than half the circle, and a major arc is greater than half the circle. So I put the 180 degrees there. That's half the circle. And when you write minor and major arcs, you do so with letters. A minor arc is two letters, so you'd say like arc A, B, and then major arc would be like arc X, Y, Z. You would need three letters for that. So here's your picture. We got a minor arc up there on the left side. Notice I used two letters over there naming it. Major arc on the right side, all the red stuff, major arc. Very nice handwriting there. And I named it over to the right side, DEF or FED. I put a dotted line in the middle there. The dotted line is supposed to represent half the circle. So when I wrote FED, it was clearly bigger than half the circle, and AB was clearly less than half the circle. Area and sector. Area, we talked about circumference in terms of a pizza. So if circumference is the length of the crust of the pizza, then area would be all the cheese, all the toppings, all the sauce, all the stuff in between. Okay, so area, people talk about square feet or square inches or square miles. That's what we're talking about here. Your formula for area is pi r squared. You've talked about that before in middle school. A sector of the circle is a fraction of the area. So it's very similar to an arc to a circumference. Okay, so an arc was a fraction of the circumference. A sector is a fraction of the area. Okay, so if the area is all the cheese and all the toppings on on the whole pizza, then a sector would be all the cheese and all the toppings on a couple pieces of the pizza. Central angle is an angle that has its vertex at the center of the circle. Gave you a little picture there. Center of the circle, central angle. Inscribed angle, an angle that has its vertex on the circle. So notice the vertex right here is on the circle. I could draw another one for you. Circle. There's the vertex. There's your angle. Inscribed angles. Here's you a picture of a central angle and an inscribed angle. Just remember when we name angles, we put the vertex in the middle. So EGF That could also be named as FGE. On the central angle, I named it ABC. You could also name that CBA, but B has got to be in the middle on that. Inscribed polygon. I got a shape with vertices on the circle. Vertices is plural for vertex, and vertex is a fancy way of saying the corners of your shape. So we got a shape with the corners on the circle. We'll give you a picture here in a second. And an inscribed circle is a circle that's stuck inside of a shape. Here is your picture of that. We got an inscribed square where all of the corners or vertices are touching the circle. So I did an inscribed square. And then an inscribed circle is touching all those sides of the square right there. So let's look at these pictures. Two different central angles. We're just going to name a couple of these. I need my vertex at the center. The first thing I see is angle AOD. That's right here. My vertex is in the center, angle AOD. Another one, I don't know, BOC. How about that? Angle BOC. You could have also said angle AOB, angle DOC. Any of those would have worked. Minor arc. I'm going to use two letters for a minor arc. Arc ED. Notice we're putting an arc above it. It's not a line segment like we were using earlier in the year. It doesn't have arrows on it. It's just an arc. Arc AB is a minor arc. I'm going to use two letters. It's less than half the circle. Major arc. I'm going to say, I usually try to make sure that it's bigger than half the circle. So I'm going to say arc ECB. Start right here, ECB. That's clearly bigger than half the circle. That one works. What's another one? Let's go ADB. That's clearly bigger than half the circle. It's a major arc. Semicircle. Semicircle is exactly half the circle. It's an arc. So I'm noticing that this is exactly half the circle. Usually when you write these, you use three letters. So I'm going to say arc BAD. I could have said BED. That's the same exact arc. I just used E instead of A right there. Same exact arc. The reason we use three letters is because it tells us which half we're looking at. You know, if I just said arc BD, and sometimes people write it like that, that tells you it's half the circle, but it doesn't tell you which half. If I say arc BCD, then that tells you I'm looking at this half of the circle. Chords. So a chord has its endpoints on the circle. So I got AB, that's a line segment, not an arc, and EB, that's a chord. There's also a special type of chord on there, and that's BD, that's a diameter. Be sure that when you write the diameter right here, BD, that's a chord, but don't put an arc there, because if you put an arc, then you're insinuating that it's a semicircle. Okay, so that's what you're telling me if you draw the arc there. So when you're talking about a chord, make sure it's a line segment. Central angle subtended by AD. I'm going to look at arc AD right here. Look at that arc. And I'm going to look at the central angle that goes along with it. That's right there. That's the angle that opens up to it. So that would be angle AOD. I would try those next two slides. Push pause, try those next two slides. There's not a semicircle on this next one, but try those next two. Two different central angles. First one that I see is angle GSD. Another one is angle DSA. Could have said angle ASG if you wanted to. That would have been a central angle. A minor arc, there's lots of minor arcs on here. WG, that's a minor arc. You could have said GW. I got GD, DG, AD, DA. I mean, you could have done AW, WA. That would have worked too. Notice I use 2 letters on each of those. When I come down to the bottom and I'm dealing with major arcs, I have to use 3 letters. And this one, I'm just want to be certain that it's bigger than half. I want to be certain that it's bigger than half. So I'm going to say WDA. WDA. That is definitely bigger than half. Notice I'm going in order of what, I'm writing them. So I started at W, I found D and then A, and went in that order. Another major arc, how about WAG? Semicircle, a lot of times students want to say DW right here. There's not a line, there's not like a diameter telling me that it's half the circle. If there was a line that went through there and W might be, somewhere down here a little bit more, then I could say, yeah, it's definitely half the circle. But I don't know that it's half the circle, so there is not one. 2 different chords. WG is a chord and AD is a chord. Central angle subtended by arc AD right here. The central angle that goes with that is angle ASD.